In a world reshaped by disruption and driven by innovation, one summit has stood at the forefront of transformation: the Times Group ET Now Global Business Summit. Since 2015, this prestigious platform has brought together the brightest minds, visionary leaders, policymakers, and global pioneers to chart the course of business and society. With India's Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi as a guiding force, GBS has ignited bold conversations, unveiling groundbreaking strategies that drive progress and prosperity. As GBS 2025 takes center stage under the theme Evolve, Emerge, Expand, the world's foremost thought leaders explored the seismic shifts shaping the global economy and shed light on how can nations adapt. How can businesses thrive? How do we expand possibilities in an interconnected world? This is where the future is reimagined. In this episode, Philip Morris International's Frederick De Wilde engaged in an informative conversation with ET Now's Aisha Faridi, focusing on tobacco industry and its future in an aptly titled session, Bridging Borders, Advancing Global Trade and Investment.
Let me start off with, you man a vast region, right? You're talking about independent states from within the Commonwealth, Middle East, the Africa region. Tell me, how do countries with very different demographics, with very different policies, with very different people and boundaries, collaborate together to try and advance global trade?
Look, I think global trade has been challenged recently. I think there are commonalities. In my company, we are operating in more than 150 countries, right? So I think many of us went through the challenges of COVID when we had to restructure the supply chain. Unfortunately, we had to go to some conflicts as well, which in our case, we had to focus always first on our employees, try to make sure that we keep them safe, sometimes relocate them. But also, we try to manage our supply because there is a peculiarity in the tobacco sector. People want their products. And if supply chain is disrupted, this opens the door to what we call illicit trade, contraband, which on the one hand deprives the states from their finances, but also opens the financing of sometimes criminal rings, right? So these are the commonalities, I guess, with many of the people in the audience here. There is a peculiarity in the tobacco sector. People might believe we have trade across the world. What are the challenges for us? The number one challenge is regulation. And I'm not talking about regulation from what you would see as a sector which cigarettes is the norm. I want to talk about what the industry is going through across the world, a significant change. We started 20 years ago with a challenge, right? And we saw people are smoking. The challenge was, how could we, for the people who continue smoking or do not quit, could we come with a solution with products that they would adhere to, but at the same time might have the potential to reduce the risk? So we searched in many areas there, and we quickly understood that the main issue for when people smoke is the combustion. When you combust your product, this is the moment where you create thousands of substances, some of them cancerogenic, and we put all our research and innovation in trying to get rid of combustion. Took a long time. We piloted products, we put science behind it, because on the one hand, we needed product that people would accept. On the other hand, we had to prove that these products would reduce the toxicity, the exposure, and ultimately the risk to people. And after years of research, we hired 500 scientists from around the world. We were not used to that as a tobacco company. We built a very solid scientific package. We started launching our products 10 years ago now in several geographies in the world where we partner with the governments. And I'm glad to say that we sort of disrupted ourselves from the inside. We can see in certain countries that one day traditional cigarette smoking will not exist anymore. And I'm glad to report that in the last quarter, 40% of our net revenues were coming from these better alternatives. So it's a significant shift. I think it's a case study of a company that was very successful, but that is disrupting itself from the inside for the good of their users, for the good of public health. And hence, this is something totally new. Not easy for government to understand. It requires a scientific understanding. It requires changes in the regulation. We've seen very nice partnerships around the world in many countries. We are not yet there in India. We are engaging with the government, but I think we really would love to have a regulatory environment in India where we could bring these products to the people that are smoking here.
That's quite interesting. And, you know, it's a very unique business, yours. It's not need and urgency based, it's addiction. That's what tobacco is, right? So tell me, I mean, let's talk about India. What are the challenges that you face? You did talk about regulation, but where do you see a market like India? And again, you know, your business per se, the one commonality across countries is addiction. If you're addicted to tobacco, you're addicted to tobacco. You know, we're talking about a growing India, per capita income is increasing, people are going ahead for premiumization, it's the top of the pyramid which is doing well. Does that impact your brand as well?
Look, I think first thing that we should mention is that people should not smoke.
Yes, feels very right.
That's what you would tell your families, your friends, right? Now, if they smoke, they should quit. But some people continue smoking and some people cannot quit. And I think with the product we've got around now, with the proof that these products are working, our duty is to bring new alternative products to the people who cannot quit. We've been doing that in several countries in the world.
Tell me more about these
India.
alternative products.
So I was saying these are products that are not combusting. They can take the form of heated tobacco products. They can take the form of nicotine pouches. And the very interesting fact there is that we see good traction in many places. And we also see results. So I can give you a couple of examples. Before being in this position, I was president of Japan and then president of the European Union, right? In Japan, since the introduction of these products, alternatives, the total cigarette business, combustible cigarette business, has been halving. Half. In Europe, take a city in Italy like Rome. In Rome, a third of the smokers have switched to these alternatives. And a very interesting case study is the one of Sweden. The alternatives, these little pouches, were introduced like 30 years ago. You look at the results now in Sweden. Sweden has the lowest smoking incidence in Europe, around 5%. Amongst 20 to 30, it's almost negligible. Look at the results now from a health perspective. When you look at the lung cancer amongst men, Sweden is the lowest level of lung cancer amongst men incidence in the European Union. So we've got proof, on the one hand, that these products can be accepted by smokers. It's a change of behaviors, but we've been investing $14 billion on our science, our research, but also on our commercial efforts to inform people about it. So it works across the world. These products are not yet available in India. We need to keep partnering with the government to make them available. But it's a major challenge. Sometimes people in the room would say, okay, smoking, this is tobacco, I know it. You know, there are more than 1 billion people smoking in the world. There are 300 million people using tobacco in India, 100 million smokers. So being capable for the ones who cannot quit to come with better alternatives where the toxicity is reduced by more than 90%, it is more than a business for us. It's a mission.
Quite interesting. You did talk about the numbers in India, right? Where is it that you see hurdles or regulatory challenges, if at all, when it comes to a market like India, because it's such a large, addressable base for a company like yours?
Look, we heard yesterday in all the panels and certainly in the speech of the Honorable Prime Minister that, first of all, the results are stellar, but there is a lot of work behind it, and we've heard the speed at which regulation has changed in many sectors. Talk about banking, energy, mobile phones. So speed is important, right? And when speed is there, investments comes, development comes. And as I was saying before, sometimes the tobacco sector is seen as an old sector, people smoke, not much can be done about it. As I mentioned before, we have the capability now to make drastic change in smokers' life, but also in public health overall. So today we still have a foreign direct investment ban in India, But with this new technology, with this new science that we could bring, not leaving the 300 million tobacco users in India behind, I think we could go through a Wixit buyout also for the tobacco sector in India. And we would be more than willing to invest here once the appropriate regulatory framework would be in place. And as mentioned by the Prime Minister yesterday, in terms of public health and policies, of course, India is a significant partner worldwide, but I think India could also shape this regulation worldwide, and that's what we are looking for.
But when a company such as yours decides to invest and get into a country, tell me what factors, what parameters actually sort of guide you to invest more in a country? And let's start off with the India example.
Look, first thing obviously is the domestic market, and it's not negligible in India, right? But it goes beyond the domestic market. I think in India, the moment we might be able to bring these products, we know that the workforce quality, the talents that we find here, that by the way we have in our company in India, but also many Indians outside India, is a key parameter. But it goes beyond that, because with the scale of India capabilities, we are sure that we can create economies of scales and innovation there, which would make India for us a hub for exports. And there is another peculiarity in our sector. This is all about the tobacco growers, right? Yeah. And in our case, India is one of the top tobacco growing country in the world. Sometimes it's not well known. We are partnering with all these growers with one thing in mind. We are implementing good agricultural practices with these people. And what we have in mind there is, first of all, help them to increase their productivity with the right equipment, the right technology. Second, try to minimize their own footprint in their communities. And the third one is to make sure that we ensure for these people, I would say, long-term sustainable revenue so that they can get the appropriate level of income for themselves and for their families. So that's very peculiar for our sector.
Well, I hope you get to a partnership with the Indian government soon and we see more alternatives here in India. Thank you so much, Frederick.
Welcome.
Pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.